My brother's fiancé demanded $3,000 and an NDA to attend our wedding. If you don't pay for the full experience, you're not invited to the ceremony. I refused to pay and watched their dream wedding completely fall apart. When I first read those words on the wedding invitation, I actually had to sit down. My hands were shaking as I processed what Emily was asking of our entire family. This wasn't just about money. This was about complete control over every aspect of their wedding, including what we could say about it afterward. The NDA clause felt like something out of a corporate merger, not a family celebration. I remember staring at the document for a full 10 minutes, reading and rereading the legal language that threatened lawsuits if anyone violated the terms. My immediate thought was that Emily had finally lost her mind. But then I realized this was actually the logical conclusion of years of increasingly controlling behavior that our family had been ignoring. The strategic part of my brain kicked in almost immediately. I've spent the last 8 years working as a senior risk analyst for a major financial firm, and my job is literally to identify potential disasters before they happen and develop mitigation strategies. I earn $185,000 annually, specifically because I can spot red flags and calculate the long-term costs of bad decisions. Looking at this wedding invitation through that lens, I could see exactly what was happening. Emily wasn't just planning an expensive wedding, she was systematically isolating Jake from his family while creating a financial barrier that would exclude anyone who couldn't or wouldn't submit to her demands. I sat there analyzing the situation like I would any high-stakes project at work. First, I identified the key stakeholders: Jake, who was clearly being manipulated but still had agency; Emily, who was the primary decision-maker and control center; our extended family, who were the targets of this financial ultimatum; and my parents, who were caught between supporting their son and enabling toxic behavior. Then I assessed the resources available to me: my professional background in risk assessment, my financial stability that made the $3,000 irrelevant to my personal budget, my detailed knowledge of Emily's behavioral patterns over the past 3 years, and most importantly, my relationship with Jake that predated Emily by 25 years. The strategic pause I took before making any decision was crucial. In my professional life, I've learned that the first response to an unreasonable demand is rarely the optimal one. I needed to think through the second and third order effects of every possible action. If I simply paid and attended, I would be enabling Emily's control while sending a message to Jake that this behavior was acceptable. If I refused and boycotted quietly, I might preserve my principles but lose the opportunity to help Jake see the situation clearly. If I refused publicly and encouraged others to do the same, I could potentially save Jake from a disastrous marriage, but I also risked being blamed if the relationship ended. What really clinched my decision was remembering a similar situation I'd handled at work 2 years earlier. A client had tried to restructure a contract with increasingly unreasonable demands, testing to see how much they could push before we pushed back. I'd recommended a firm but professional refusal, and the client had eventually backed down completely once they realized we weren't going to be bullied. The principle was the same here. Emily was testing the family's boundaries, and someone needed to establish clear limits. My background gave me several key advantages in this situation that other family members didn't have. First, my financial position meant I could afford the $3,000 without any hardship, so my refusal couldn't be dismissed as sour grapes about money. I have $127,000 in savings, no debt except my mortgage, and an investment portfolio worth $89,000. So the wedding cost was irrelevant to my decision-making process. This financial independence meant my objection was purely principled, which would carry more weight with Jake when he inevitably questioned my motives. Second, my professional expertise in risk analysis meant I could articulate exactly why this wedding structure was problematic in ways that would resonate with Jake's logical mind. I'd helped companies avoid millions in losses by identifying similar patterns of escalating demands and control tactics. I could frame Emily's behavior in business terms that Jake would understand, since he works in project management and thinks systematically about resource allocation and stakeholder management. Third, I had documentation skills from my work that would be crucial if this situation escalated. I automatically screenshot important communications, maintain detailed records of conversations, and organize information in ways that reveal patterns over time. I'd been unconsciously building a file on Emily's concerning behaviors for months, including her attempts to limit Jake's contact with friends, her criticism of our family traditions, and her gradual takeover of Jake's personal decisions. Fourth, I have professional relationships with 3 different attorneys through my work. Corporate lawyers who handle contract disputes and understand the enforceability of documents like NDAs. I knew I could get expert opinions on Emily's legal threats without having to find representation from scratch. Most importantly, I had a track record of successful strategic thinking in family situations. When our cousin David was going through a messy divorce 3 years ago, I'd helped him organize his financial documentation and connect with the right legal resources, which ultimately saved him $47,000 in the settlement. When my parents were being pressured by a contractor who was trying to add ridiculous charges to their kitchen renovation, I'd stepped in with a detailed analysis of the contract terms and market rates that got the contractor to back down completely. Jake knew about both of these situations, so he'd understand that my involvement wasn't emotional or reactive. It was based on proven judgment. The moment I decided to refuse, I knew I needed to handle this methodically rather than reactively. My first step was to conduct what I call a stakeholder analysis, understanding the positions, motivations, and likely responses of everyone involved. I spent 2 hours mapping out the family dynamics, Emily's probable strategy, and the various scenarios that could unfold based on different response patterns. I started by calling my friend Marcus, who's a corporate attorney specializing in contract law. I sent him a photo of the NDA portion of the invitation and asked for his professional opinion. His response was immediate and clear. This is legally meaningless theater. A wedding isn't a business transaction, guests aren't employees, and there's no consideration being exchanged that would make this enforceable. She could sue, but she'd lose immediately and probably face sanctions for frivolous litigation. More importantly, anyone demanding this level of control over family communications is throwing up massive red flags. That conversation confirmed my instinct that Emily was using legal-sounding language to intimidate people who didn't know better. But it also revealed something more concerning. She was either genuinely delusional about her legal authority, or she was deliberately trying to manipulate family members through fear tactics. Either way, it suggested deeper problems in her relationship with Jake. My next consultation was with my colleague Jennifer, who specializes in organizational psychology and helps companies identify toxic management patterns. I described Emily's escalating demands over the past year without naming names, framing it as a case study in control dynamics. Jennifer's analysis was devastating. This person is systematically isolating their partner from their support network while establishing financial barriers to maintain that isolation. The NDA component suggests they're planning behaviors they know others will find objectionable. This is textbook emotional abuse escalation. They're testing to see who can be controlled and who needs to be eliminated from the partner's life. Armed with this professional perspective, I reached out to Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a family therapist I'd met through my company's employee assistance program. I'd consulted with her previously when helping my cousin David, and she'd provided valuable insights about manipulation tactics in relationships. Her assessment of Emily's wedding demands was unequivocal. The combination of financial barriers and communication control is designed to ensure only compliant people attend this wedding. Your brother is being isolated from anyone who might question this relationship. The most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable this behavior, even if it means missing the wedding. With expert opinions supporting my instinct, I began systematically documenting everything related to this situation. I created a detailed timeline of Emily's increasingly controlling behavior over the past 3 years, starting with small incidents where she'd redirected Jake's plans or criticized his family, escalating to more serious examples, like the time she convinced him to skip our father's birthday dinner because she'd planned a date night, or when she'd insisted he unfriend several longtime buddies because she didn't like their influence. I also began quietly reaching out to other family members to understand their positions and concerns. What I discovered was that almost everyone had noticed Emily's problematic behavior, but nobody wanted to be the first to speak up. My uncle Robert told me he'd been planning to decline the invitation, but was worried about causing family drama. My cousin Lisa admitted she'd been avoiding Jake lately because Emily made every interaction uncomfortable with her demands for attention and control over conversations. The evidence-gathering process revealed something crucial. This wedding wasn't really about celebrating Jake and Emily's love. It was about Emily establishing dominance over Jake's family relationships and creating a financial barrier that would exclude anyone unwilling to submit to her authority. The NDA wasn't about privacy. It was about preventing people from discussing her behavior or supporting Jake if he eventually recognized the problems in their relationship. My decision-making process involved calculating the risks and benefits of various approaches. I could pay the money and attend while privately supporting Jake, but that would validate Emily's tactics and encourage future escalation. I could refuse quietly and simply not attend, but that would leave Jake without any clear understanding of why his family was pulling away. Or I could refuse publicly and clearly, accepting the immediate conflict, but potentially saving Jake from years of escalating manipulation. The turning point came when I realized that my professional expertise gave me both the obligation and the opportunity to protect Jake in ways other family members couldn't. I had the financial resources to weather Emily's retaliation, the strategic thinking skills to counter her manipulation tactics, and the relationship credibility with Jake to make him listen to difficult truths. I decided to refuse the wedding invitation completely, but to do it in a way that created maximum strategic pressure while maintaining my relationship with Jake. My plan involved 3 phases. First, clearly communicating my position to Jake with detailed reasoning he couldn't dismiss. Second, encouraging other family members to make their own informed decisions about participation. And third, positioning myself as a resource for Jake when Emily's behavior inevitably escalated beyond what he could rationalize. The implementation began with a carefully crafted conversation with Jake. Instead of attacking Emily directly, I focused on the business principles that made this wedding structure problematic. I explained that requiring guests to sign NDAs created a presumption that objectionable behavior was being planned, since people only restrict communication when they expect criticism. I pointed out that the financial barriers ensured only people willing to submit to Emily's control would attend, which meant Jake wouldn't get authentic feedback about his relationship from the people who know him best. Most importantly, I asked Jake to consider what this pattern meant for their future marriage. If Emily was willing to exclude his family members over their refusal to sign legal documents, how would she handle future disagreements about careers, children, or major life decisions? I positioned it as a risk assessment question. Was he comfortable entering a marriage where his partner had already demonstrated a willingness to use financial and legal pressure to control his relationships? Jake's initial response was defensive, but I could see the strategic thinking part of his mind engaging with my arguments. He couldn't dismiss my concerns as emotional or financially motivated, because my track record of successful judgment in family situations was too strong. He also couldn't argue that Emily's demands were reasonable, because his own project management experience made him recognize the control tactics I was describing. The second phase involved discreet conversations with key family members, sharing the professional insights I'd gathered without pressuring anyone to make specific decisions. I let Uncle Robert know that the NDA was legally meaningless, which eliminated his fear of potential lawsuits. I shared Dr. Hendrick's perspective on isolation tactics with my parents, helping them understand that their instinct to keep the peace was actually enabling abusive behavior. The most crucial conversation was with my cousin Mark, who works in public relations and understands reputation management. I explained that Emily was essentially betting that family social pressure would overcome people's objections to her unreasonable demands. If enough people refused to participate, her strategy would backfire by making her demands look ridiculous rather than exclusive. Within a week, the family group chat had transformed from reluctant acceptance to open criticism of Emily's wedding structure. My refusal had given other family members permission to voice their own concerns, and Emily found herself facing much more organized resistance than she'd expected. Her attempts to guilt-trip individuals were failing because people now understood the strategic reasoning behind the refusal. The consequences began almost immediately and escalated in ways that validated every aspect of my strategic analysis. Emily's first response was to have Jake call me repeatedly, trying to negotiate some kind of compromise that would get me to attend while maintaining her control structure. When I explained that the fundamental problem was the demand for financial submission combined with communication control, Jake couldn't offer any meaningful concessions because Emily refused to modify those core requirements. Emily's second tactic was to try isolating me from other family members by claiming I was jealous of their relationship or trying to sabotage their happiness. This backfired spectacularly because I'd already shared the professional assessments and strategic reasoning with key family members. When Emily told my mother that I was being unreasonably controlling, my mom responded by asking why a family celebration required legal documents and financial barriers. Exactly the reframe I'd hoped would emerge. The financial pressure on Emily's wedding plans became apparent within 2 weeks. She'd budgeted for full participation from Jake's family, and our collective refusal created a significant revenue shortfall for her planned activities. The yacht excursion was canceled first, followed by the spa day, as vendor deposits came due without sufficient guest payments to cover costs. Emily found herself trapped between scaling back her vision and paying dramatically higher per-person costs for the remaining participants. More devastating was the social pressure that developed as word spread beyond our immediate family. Emily's attempt to use financial barriers for exclusivity backfired when people began viewing the wedding as a cash grab rather than a celebration. Her own friends started questioning the reasonableness of her demands, especially when they learned about the NDA requirements. Several of her bridesmaids backed out when they realized the total cost of participation exceeded $4,000 per person, including the designer dress requirements. The professional consequences for Emily were equally significant. Her social media influencer aspirations suffered when potential sponsors learned about the wedding controversy. Brands are extremely sensitive to any association with manipulative or controlling behavior, and Emily's reputation for creating family drama made her less attractive for partnership opportunities. Her follower count dropped by 30% as people became aware of her treatment of Jake's family. Jake's response evolved exactly as I'd predicted. Initially defensive and protective of Emily, he began privately questioning her decisions as the consequences mounted. The turning point came when Emily demanded he choose between attending his father's birthday celebration and helping her manage wedding vendor crises. Jake realized he was being forced to prioritize Emily's artificial emergencies over genuine family relationships, which aligned perfectly with the manipulation patterns I'd described. The final collapse of Emily's wedding strategy occurred when she made the tactical error of giving Jake an ultimatum. Choose between his family and their marriage. My strategic positioning had created the foundation for Jake to recognize this as the culmination of years of escalating control tactics rather than an isolated incident. He'd seen the professional assessments I'd shared, witnessed Emily's behavior toward multiple family members, and experienced firsthand her unwillingness to compromise on core control issues. When Jake called off the wedding, Emily's response validated every aspect of my initial risk assessment. She immediately began a campaign of public blame shifting, social media manipulation, and attempts to extract financial compensation for her investment in their relationship. Her behavior during the breakup revealed the personality traits that would have made the marriage disastrous, and confirmed that my strategic intervention had saved Jake from years of escalating manipulation. Jake not only ended the relationship with Emily, but emerged with a clear understanding of manipulation tactics that will protect him in future relationships. He's now dating someone who actively encourages his family relationships and includes us in their major decisions. Exactly the opposite of Emily's isolation strategy. His career has flourished without the constant drama and financial drain of Emily's demands, resulting in a promotion and $23,000 salary increase within 8 months of the breakup. Emily's attempt to quickly rebound with one of Jake's former colleagues backfired when her new target recognized the control patterns I'd helped Jake identify. Her second engagement lasted only 4 months before ending in similar drama, which permanently damaged her reputation in their social circle. She's currently living with her parents while attempting to rebuild her influencer career, having lost most of her sponsor relationships and social media following. My parents have acknowledged that my strategic approach saved Jake from what could have been decades of manipulation and financial abuse, and now regularly consult with me on family decisions involving boundary setting and relationship assessment.